This is an engineer video. This is going to be considerations for landmine warfare in winter. This does get covered in mine manuals, but usually it's like one paragraph. They just don't put much in there. But here are some tips and things that I've picked up over the years, either through my own study, through reading on histories and that stuff from like Korea, Finland, and so forth from the Winter War. And also, you know, experience with screwing with mines during wintertime during exercises. Now, first off, when you put in a mine on a snowfield, you need to make sure it has a firm base. So if it's, you know, multiple feet of snow underneath it, you're going to have to do one of two things. You're either going to have to clear out a larger area than the mine and put down, say, a board or a piece of cardboard, something that's much larger than the mine that this can sit on. You also need to go through and you have to compact that snow as much as possible. Make it as firm as possible so that as a vehicle will go over the top of it, if it's an anti-tank mine, you're still going to get sufficient pressure on the pressure plate to activate the fuse. You don't want the tank to drive over the top and just push the mine down in the snow and not activate it. Now, if the mine is like this, the tmd Bravo, wooden box mine. And this one, for those of you that didn't watch the video on this one, I did it a few years ago. This is the pressure plate right here, the board. Well, during the Korean War with these boards here would fill with ice, and then you could literally have an American Sherman tank or a British Cromwell or whatever they had with their forces drive over the top of these, and the ice would prevent it from activating. A problem that you can have with mines like the M15, where the pressure plate goes down inside, you can get ice buildup right in here around the pressure plate also. It could start to seep into the mine. It doesn't reach far enough in there to interfere with the internals, but that moisture can build up in there, ice up, and you can have the same problem. Now, with mines that have kind of a crush type fuse, like a Russian TM62P3 or the US M19, you don't have to worry as much on that because the vehicle will go over the top. This plastic part on the fuse breaks, caves in, and then activates the detonator, activating the fuse. Not as much of a worry with those in the middle of wintertime. But with these, how do you combat that? The easiest thing you can do is covering them with plastic. Piece of plastic over the top of the mine, making sure that no moisture can get at the pressure plates. Or pressure pad, depending on the type of mine. You know, have just a little bit of airspace in there so that it will pack down, you know, as you put snow over the top. Now, the snow you put over the top, you leave that loose. You don't pack it in. The snow that's underneath, you do got to make sure to pack it in, or you have something sufficiently large enough and stable enough to keep the mine from sinking down into the snow too far. On a lot of snow fields, what we would do during winter operations is we would dig down to the grass, the dirt underneath the snow, put the mine over the top of that, and then the snow that we took out, we'd put over the top. And you just got to make sure that the snow you put back over the top matches the snow around it. You don't want to have a perfectly white field around it, and where your mine is, you got dirt and crud all mixed in the snow that's really visible. Now, bounding fragmentation mines, like the OZM3 here, an OZM72, an American M16, and their comparables around the world. with these, you need to make sure it doesn't fall over, because these are typically tripwire activated, and it has to stay upright so that when someone or something hits that tripwire, it can pull the pin out of the fuse, setting it off. So what you're supposed to do with them, you would tie these to the bases of small trees, fence posts if you're putting these in on the sides of roads. If you're putting them in fields, get yourself a great big stake. Get that pushed down to the firm soil underneath, and then tie the mine to the stake to keep it in place, and then attach in your tripwire onto your pin, and then you camouflage it with brush. Make it look like there's a bush there, a piece of evergreen, something like that, so that anyone that's traveling through there won't necessarily notice it. I would not recommend piling in snow around it, but if you have to, I would definitely make sure to protect the fuse area. You want to put a baggie or something over the top of the fuse. Make sure that tripwire goes through the bag into the pin. How could you do that? Take your baggie, sandwich bag, whatever, make a small hole in it, run the tripwire through after you've tied it off to the anchor point. Move the bag down the tripwire a little, tie the tripwire in on your pin, bring that baggie back over and put it over the top of the fuse. Make sure that you still got, a decent amount of room up here so that the pin can be pulled inside that bag. That would also help with that going off. Now, this type of mine, the PMD-6, like with the anti-tank mines, especially the TMD Bravo, it does freeze up in snow with the ice. The ice will build up in here between your pressure plate and the box. And it will freeze solid so that someone could literally stand on top, jump on it, and not set it off, depending on how cold it is. I'm talking like really below winter. Like stuff you're talking 10 below, 20 below, that type of stuff for long periods of time. What you can do on these, when in placing them, get a plastic bag. Put this inside the plastic bag, go through, install your fuse in that, set your mine up, close the bag off, put this down in the hole, make sure you got a firm base. That bag should help cut down on the moisture getting in and seizing up the casing. Directional mines. Some of you are probably not aware of this. When you see these, you see pictures of them. They always look like that. Well, even in the Claymore manual, it says during winter time, when emplacing the Claymore in snow on ice, you're supposed to do this. Put the legs straight out front and back, and then adjust the angle on the mine to cover your kill zone more effectively. Small anti-personnel mines don't usually get used in a minefield during winter. It's very rare that you're going to see laying of a cluster minefield in winter warfare. It's actually discouraged. But small mines like the VS-50 here, and also the US M14, which I can't find my training aid yet, these do get used. How they get used, according to doctrine, is you hit an enemy outpost, you did a raid, you're pulling out of there. As you're pulling out, the enemy is going to be following your trail, following those tracks through the snow. So, according to US doctrine at least, you would look at your ski track behind you. Make a small hole, firm bottom, arm your mine, put it in that hole, put some snow over the top, run your ski over the top of it a couple times to cover up its air. As the enemy ski troops come through, they're going to put pressure on the pressure plate, setting it off right underneath the ski where it has most weight, whereas the person is directly over the mine on the ski at that time. It'll then detonate, damage the ski, and take off a good chunk of leg. It would be the same with the PMM series of mines also. Mines in warfare, you try to stay away from putting in large defensive minefields, but it does happen. It could be called for because of the intent. You're trying to stop a massive tank assault across a wide open area. Then you put in your standard row minefields with anti-tank mines with the tips I gave you. But a lot of the times in winter warfare, you'll come across it says use mines only in areas where you know the enemy's going to go through. Examples, going down roads and trails. Depending on what the enemy is, if it's going to be dismounted ski troops or they're coming through on snowmobiles, whatever it is, well, that stuff, a lot of it can be taken care of with the anti-personnel mines. If you're putting them on roads, you're probably not going to dig into the road to put in a mine. You're going to dig down to the road surface. You're going to lay the anti-tank mine there, go through and camouflage. And you're going to do your best to make sure that the enemy cannot go around that point in the road. So maybe you're going to put it on a road that travels on the side of the hill. You have one side it slopes up. It's too much of an angle. The tank or whatever can't go that way. It can't go on the downhill side without sliding down. You can put in mines there. Put in a point minefield on the roadway in that location. That covers all the tips that I could find and I could gather up over the years. Just because it's winter time, and even if you're in seriously northern Canada, up near the Arctic Circle, you can still use mines, but you just have to think about it. Because you're not just thinking about getting the enemy to go over the mine. You got to think about how to make sure that that mine is going to go off when you want it to. And you got to think about how ice and frost will affect your mines, preventing fuses from activating. You don't have to worry as much about the internals on the mine, because if the mine has not been breached, there's no cracks, no dents, no holes, the internals overall should be okay. You could end up with frost building up inside that could interfere with the striker, but that's not going to happen as much. You got to think of more on the fuses, the pressure plates, the pull pins that activate the mine. That's what you got to think about protecting to make sure the mine will do what you want it to do when you need it to do it, to slow your enemy. You're not going to stop the enemy with the mines. You're just going to slow them down. You'll hear that mine explosion, and then you know, hey, they're coming on that trail over there, or they're coming up that road over there. Or they're trying to run tanks on the field to my left, not to my right. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and Militia movements, always remember essayons.